How the P-47 Thunderbolt broke the Luftwaffe ***. The sky above Western Europe was never meant to belong to machines like this. At 30,000 feet, the air thins into something brittle, a pale and hostile layer where engines gasp, metal contracts, and human bodies begin to fail. It is not a place for elegance. It is not a place for fragile wings or delicate balance. And yet, on a cold morning over occupied France, German pilots climbing toward the fight looked up and laughed. What they saw offended every instinct they had developed since the beginning of the war. Below them rose American fighters that looked wrong, too large, too blunt, too heavy to survive where they were going. Their wings seemed stubby. Their fuselages bloated. Their climb slow and labored. From inside his cockpit, a Luftwaffe pilot reportedly muttered disbelief through his oxygen mask. Machines shaped like that did not belong at altitude. Machines like that did not win air wars. What he did not know, what no one yet fully understood, was that he was witnessing the opening chapter of a transformation. Not just of an aircraft, but of air combat itself. Because the machine clawing its way upward that morning was not designed to win by elegance or finesse. It was built to endure. To absorb punishment. To strike once and disappear into the cold, thin sky where its enemies could not follow. It was the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. And it would turn mockery into fear. The problem the United States could not ignore. The story of the Thunderbolt does not begin in combat. It begins in failure. In the summer of 1940, the United States watched Europe collapse from a distance. Poland had fallen. France had fallen. The skies over Britain were burning as German fighters and bombers demonstrated a ruthless efficiency that rewrote every assumption about modern war. American military planners paid attention. They studied wrecked airfields. Shot down aircraft. Pilot debris smuggled out of Europe. And one conclusion became impossible to avoid: the next war would be won at altitude. German fighters dominated the vertical plane. They climbed fast, struck hard, and controlled the terms of engagement. Any American fighter sent into that environment would need to escort bombers deep into hostile airspace, survive heavy fire, and fight at heights where oxygen, fuel, and power all became scarce. The Army Air Forces issued a requirement that bordered on absurd. They wanted a fighter that could operate above 30,000 feet, carry heavy armament, escort bombers long distances, survive intense damage, outdive anything it encountered. No existing aircraft could do all of that. Most engineers would have compromised. Alexander Kartveli did not. A design that violated every rule. Kartveli, a Georgian-born engineer working at Republic Aviation, looked at the requirement and made a decision that stunned even his own team. He rejected lightness. Instead of shaving weight, he embraced mass. Instead of chasing maneuverability, he chased power and survivability. He designed a fighter around one core idea: if altitude was the battlefield, the engine would decide the war. The heart of the new aircraft was the Pratt & Whitney RD-2800 Double Wasp, an 18-cylinder radial engine producing over 2,000 horsepower. To make it work at extreme altitude, Kartveli paired it with a massive turbo-supercharger buried deep in the fuselage, connected by ducting that ran like arteries through the aircraft. The result was enormous. When the XP-47B prototype rolled out, it outweighed many medium bombers. It carried 8.50 caliber machine guns, for in each wing, more firepower than any fighter in the world. Its fuselage was thick. Its wings broad. Its silhouette unmistakable. Test pilots approached it with suspicion. This was not a duelist's machine. This was flying artillery. A deadly learning curve. The Thunderbolt did not ease its pilots into acceptance. Between late 1942 and early 1943, training accidents piled up. The aircraft ground looped on takeoff. Its massive propeller produced brutal torque. In dives, it accelerated so violently that pilots sometimes found their controls locking under compressibility effects. Young airmen died without ever seeing combat. Squadrons whispered that the aircraft was cursed, that it was too much machine for human reflexes, that it punished mistakes without mercy. And yet, those who survived noticed something unsettling. The engine never quit. Aircraft returned riddled with holes, oil leaking, cylinders damaged, control surfaces shredded, and they still landed. Where lighter fighters disintegrated, the P-47 came home scarred but intact. It was not graceful, but it was alive. First combat, failure and misunderstanding. When the Thunderbolt entered combat in early 1943, reality hit hard. German fighters outturned it, outclimbed it at low altitude. Pilots trained in turning fights found themselves bleeding energy and losing engagements. Losses mounted. Victories did not. The Luftwaffe dismissed the aircraft immediately. German pilots mocked it as a flying milk bottle. Too big. Too slow. Too American. They were half right. The Thunderbolt was the wrong fighter for the way Americans were trying to use it. That would change. Robert S. Johnson and the day the Thunderbolt refused to die. The turning point came not through victory, but through survival. On June 26, 1943, Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson flew his P-47 on a mission over France when German Focke-Wulf 190s attacked from above. His aircraft was shredded. His canopy shattered. His oxygen system failed. Blood filled his cockpit. By any rational standard, Johnson should have been dead. A German pilot pulled in behind him and fired repeatedly at point-blank range. Cannon shells detonated inside the aircraft. Machine gun rounds tore through metal, flesh, and glass. The German expected wreckage. Instead, the Thunderbolt kept flying. When Johnson limped back to England, ground crews counted over 200 holes in his aircraft. The engine still ran. The airframe still held. Johnson lived. That moment changed everything. The discovery of a new kind of fighter. American pilots began to understand what they had. The P-47 was not meant to turn. It was meant to control altitude. Above 25,000 feet, German engines struggled. Their superchargers gasped. Their climb rates faded. The Thunderbolt remained strong. And when it dove, nothing could follow. Its weight, once mocked, turned into speed. In a dive, the P-47 accelerated faster than any aircraft in Europe. German pilots who tried to pursue simply watched it vanish. Commanders like Hubert Zemke and Francis Gabby-Gabreski rewrote tactics. They climbed high, waited, and struck in violent, vertical passes. Boom and zoom. German pilots called it something else. They called it death from above. 8 guns and a 6-foot sphere of destruction. At the bottom of those dives, the Thunderbolt delivered something no German fighter could match. 8.50 caliber machine guns firing simultaneously produced a converging storm of metal. Pilots described it as a 6-foot sphere of annihilation. Aircraft caught inside it did not limp away. They disintegrated. During the Schweinfurt-Regensburg missions, P-47s tore apart German heavy fighters preparing to attack bombers. Witnesses described wings ripping free. Aircraft exploding mid-air. Entire formations erased in seconds. This was not finesse. This was industrial violence. When the Luftwaffe lost altitude, and with it, control. By late 1943, altitude itself betrayed Germany. Above 28,000 feet, the Luftwaffe lost its edge. Engines struggled. Pilots suffocated. And above them waited Thunderbolts. One of those encounters ended the career of Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most accomplished aces. His experience meant nothing against physics. The P-47s came from above, faster than he could respond, and erased him from the sky. The message reached Hermann Göring's desk in blunt language. The Americans had an aircraft that dominated at altitude, absorbed catastrophic damage, delivered overwhelming firepower, could not be chased, could not be intimidated. The balance had shifted. The P-47 evolves. With the introduction of the paddle blade propeller on later P-47D variants, climb performance improved dramatically. Acceleration sharpened. The gap narrowed. German pilots accustomed to dictating engagement terms found themselves reacting instead. And then the Thunderbolt found a second purpose. From sky dominator to ground reaper. By 1944, the P-47 was no longer just a fighter. It was a ground attack monster. Carrying bombs, rockets, and those same 8 machine guns, Thunderbolts tore apart rail lines, convoys, armored columns, and supply depots. German soldiers learned to fear its sound, a rising roar that meant death was seconds away. On D-Day, over 500 Thunderbolts patrolled the invasion beaches. German aircraft barely appeared. Those that did rarely returned. Why the Thunderbolt really won? The P-47 did not win because it was perfect. It won because it was supported by a system Germany could not match. American factories replaced losses overnight. Pilots trained with fuel and ammunition in abundance. Mechanics had spare parts. Squadrons rotated and recovered. German pilots entered combat in 1944 with fewer than 100 flight hours. The outcome was inevitable. The final verdict. By the war's end, the Thunderbolt had destroyed more enemy aircraft and ground targets than any other American fighter in Europe. The aircraft that was mocked became feared. The fighter that should not have worked became unavoidable. Not because it was elegant, but because it endured.